The air inside the bar was dense. Smell of old beer, sweaty leather, and cigarette smoke stuck to the walls. The tables were occupied by large men, leather vests marked with the skull of the Iron Reapers, loud laughter, bottles hitting wood. She just wanted to order a soft drink. Mike Tyson's wife walked across the narrow corridor between the tables, trying not to attract attention. Short steps. Looked down, the bag tight against the body. But one of them saw it, the biggest. Tattoos going up her neck, thick beard, eyes that didn't blink properly. He stretched out his arm as she passed. He grabbed the collar of her shirt. He pulled hard. The fabric tore with a dry snap that cut off all conversations in the bar. She tried to back off, but his hand was already closed around her neck. Not with explosive violence, but with pressure, with intention, like someone holding something they think they can control. The entire bar stopped. No one laughed anymore. No one drank. Everyone was watching. She tried to speak. "Please, Her voice came out weak, broken. The kind of sound a throat makes when fear squeezes tighter than fingers. The brute tilted his head to the side, as if studying a trapped insect. He looked at his teammates, smiled, a crooked smile, full of ego. "Calm down, princess. No one will hurt you." Still, the other Reapers laughed. Low, dirty. One of them hit the table. Another raised the bottle, as if toasting. She felt her legs weaken, the heart beating so hard it seemed audible. The nails dug into his hand, trying to loosen the pressure, but he only tightened more. And it was there, in that silence full of shame and impotence, that something changed. Outside, beyond the door ajar, a sound. Steps, firm, heavy, rhythmic, the kind of step that doesn't hesitate. The brute frowned. He turned his face to the door. Who is this idiot? She recognized the sound before anyone else, and for the first time since she was grabbed, breathed, and you. What would you do if you saw someone you love being humiliated like this, in front of everyone? Comment there. The door was still ajar. The sound of footsteps had stopped, but the tension is not. The brute kept his hand firmly on her neck. Now it was no longer fun. It was demonstration. He wanted everyone to see it, that everyone knew who was in charge there. She tried to free herself, pushing his arm with both hands, but it was like pushing concrete. "Let go, please." Her voice came out like a hoarse whisper. He leaned his body, pressing her against the counter. The wood creaked. The bartender looked away. No one moved. One of the accomplices, thinner, wearing a dirty cap and scar on his chin, approached. He patted the big man on the shoulder. "Show who's boss, brother." The smile that spread between them was that of someone who had done that before, of someone who knew that no one would intervene, of those who bet on collective cowardice. She smelled alcohol on his breath. He saw the tattoo on his forearm, a broken chain, bitter irony. The man tilted his face closer. "You chose the wrong bar, pretty." Her eyes burned. "Don't be afraid now. Of anger. Of humiliation. The kind that burns inside and finds no way out." But then another Reaper stood up. Elder, face marked by old scars. He walked to the back exit door and locked it with the iron lock. The sound of metal pounding echoed. Now there were no more possible witnesses. There was no easy way out. She noticed, and the whole body understood before the mind. No one inside was going to help her. None of those men. None of those who drank quietly at the corner tables. None of those who now looked at the glasses as if nothing was happening. She was alone. Until the creaking of the front door. It didn't hit. It was not opened forcefully. It was pushed slowly, steadfast, as someone who already knows what he will find. And the wooden floor groaned under a different weight, heavier, more accurate. The brute turned his head to the entrance. He stopped smiling. Someone had arrived, and that someone. He did not come to ask permission. The old wooden floor creaked again, this time higher, more intentional, heavy steps, firm, rhythmic like heartbeats. They were not the steps of those who enter to drink. They were steps of those who enter to finish something. The brute who held the woman frowned. His hand was still on her neck, but the pressure loosened for a second. Only one. He turned his face to the door. "Who the hell is that?" No one answered. The entire bar turned to the entrance. The conversations died. The glasses stopped in the air. Even the bartender stopped drying the glass he was holding. The sound of footsteps continued. Steadfast, no rush, without fear. She, still pinned against the counter, recognized the rhythm before seeing the face. Her heart raced, but not out of fear, of relief, that kind of relief that is almost pain. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Just a deep breath, profound. The first since it all began. She knew who she was. The brute did not. He let go of her neck slowly and turned his body completely towards the entrance. The other reapers did the same. 6 large men, in leather, chains, and tattoos. 6 men used to intimidating. But something in those steps made them all go quiet. It wasn't noise. It was intention, the kind of sound that carries moral weight, the kind of presence that changes the temperature of an environment before it is even seen. One of the younger reapers, cap back, stepped aside, instinctive, like an animal that senses danger before seeing it. The leader, the one holding the woman, tried to maintain his posture. He stretched his shoulders. He closed his hands, but his breathing changed. It became shorter, more controlled, and then the door opened wide. The streetlight contrasted with the dim light of the bar. For a second, only the silhouette was visible. Discharge, broad shoulders, upright posture, and when the light hit his face, the silence was absolute. Mike Tyson came in. It didn't run. He didn't scream. He did not threaten. He just walked in, towel still around his neck, hands at the sides of the body, but closed, eyes fixed, calm breathing, the kind of calm that is far more dangerous than any scream. The brute swallowed. The other reapers exchanged quick glances. Nobody said anything. No one laughed. The woman closed her eyes for a second, and when he opened it, he had tears, but not of despair, of hope. The whole bar understood. They had messed with the wrong woman. Mike stopped 3 steps from the door. It did not advance. He did not back down. It just stayed there, stationary, watching, the towel hanging around his neck still damp from training, hands closed at the sides of the body, the shoulders relaxed, but firm, the kind of relaxation that fighters know, the kind that comes before the explosion. He didn't look at the others. He looked only at her, and when his eyes met hers, something passed between the two. Speechless, no gestures, just recognition. She was fine, still standing, still conscious, but her neck had red markings. Mike saw it, and his jaw locked. He took a deep breath, once, slowly, like someone who counts to 10 inside, like someone holding something that wants to explode but knows it needs to control. The brute, still close to her, took a step to the side. He tried to gain space. He tried to appear bigger than he was. It didn't work. Mike Tyson turned his gaze to him. It wasn't a look of anger. It was worse. It was an evaluation look. The kind of gaze that measures, that calculates, that decides how much force will be needed. And the brute felt it. He felt the weight of that silence. She felt that every second that passed without him saying something was 1 second less of control. He tried to smile, forced, nervous. "Hey, champion, this is not a ring." "No." His voice came out higher than he wanted. Mike didn't answer. He just tilted his head slightly to the side, like someone who hears something far away, like someone who evaluates whether words are worth wasting. And then the brute made the mistake. He stretched out his arm. He grabbed the woman's shoulder again. He pulled her closer to him, as a shield, as a possession, as a provocation. "She's with me now, you know." His face was inches from her face. She closed her eyes, turning her face, and Mike Tyson took the first step. It didn't run. He didn't scream. Just 1 step. But it was the kind of step that changed everything. The wood of the floor groaned under the weight. The air became denser. The light seemed to darken a tone. The other reapers, who were scattered across the tables, instinctively retreated, not because Mike Tyson threatened them, but because something in his body language said, "Don't interfere." The brute tried to keep his pose, but his hands trembled, just a little. But they trembled, and Mike saw it. The whole bar caught the air, because everyone knew. The limit had been crossed, and now there was no turning back. Mike took another step, slowly, deliberate, his eyes fixed on the brute, no blinking, without deviating. The kind of focus boxers carry before the first blow, when they already know what they are going to do, when they have already decided. The reaper in the cap, the youngest, tried to make a joke. "Hey, champion, this is not a ring. Here we don't wear gloves." His voice came out thin, artificial, the kind of phrase that tries to hide fear with arrogance. No one laughed, not even his own teammates. Mike Tyson kept moving forward. It didn't accelerate, it didn't run, only continued. And with each step, the space between him and the brute decreased. And along with the space, the courage of the man who held the woman decreased. The big guy noticed. He realized that no one was laughing, that no one was supporting, that he was suddenly alone in that. He brought his face even closer to her face, his lips almost touching her ear. "She's our problem now, Tyson. You should have stayed at the gym." His voice tried to sound threatening, but his hands trembled more. She felt it. She felt the cold sweat in the palm of his hand. He felt his breathing quickening. He felt that he was losing. Mike stopped, 2 meters away. He stopped and took a deep breath. Once, two. The towel on his neck swayed slightly with the movement of his chest, and then he spoke, low, calm, but with a clarity that cut through the air like a blade. "Let her go." It was not requested. It was instruction. The brute tried to laugh, but the sound came out broken. Nervous. "What if I don't let go?" Mike tilted his head. "Then you'll find out why I don't need gloves." The silence that followed was absolute. No one moved. No one breathed loudly. The bartender had completely stopped pretending to be busy. Even the light in the bar seemed dimmer. The older reaper, the one who had locked the back door, stepped forward, as if he were going to intervene, as if he were going to help his partner. But Mike turned his gaze to him, just the look, and the man stopped. It froze midway, because in Mike's eyes there was no explosive rage. There was something worse. There was certainty. Sure, he controlled that space. Sure, he had seen worse violence. Sure that, if he needed to, he would finish it without hesitation. The brute felt it too. He felt that the control he thought he had, it never really existed. He looked to the sides, for his teammates, waiting for support, waiting for someone to come along. But everyone avoided his gaze, and it was there, at that exact moment, that the whole bar realized the bully had lost. Even before any blow is made, he had already lost. The brute's hand was still on her shoulder, but now the pressure was different. It was no longer domination. It was desperation disguised as control. She felt the difference. She felt his fingers tighten. Not to hurt her, but to hold on to something, like someone who clings to a plank before sinking. She tried to draw air. Her breath came out short. Prey. The chest rising and falling too fast. Her nails scratched his arm. They left red marks on their tattooed skin. He didn't even feel it, or pretended not to feel it. And then he did his worst. He laughed. It wasn't a laugh of fun. It was a laugh from someone trying to convince himself that he is still in control, that he can still win. An empty laugh. False. And it was this laughter that broke the last barrier. Tyson closed his eyes for half a second. He took a deep breath. And when she opened her eyes again, something had changed. It was no longer evaluation. It was a decision. He was no longer going to negotiate. I wasn't going to wait any longer. I wasn't going to give it a chance anymore. Then he took a step forward, steadfast, final. His boot hit the wooden floor. The sound echoed. And behind the counter, a bottleneck that was on the edge fell. The glass shattered on the floor. The noise cut through the air like a gunshot. Everyone is scared, except Mike. He didn't even blink. The brute turned his face instinctively to the sound of the bottle breaking. Just a second, just a fraction of attention diverted. But it was enough. When he turned his face back, Mike was already too close. Very close. The distance that used to be 2 meters was now half. The brute smelled his sweat. She felt the warmth of his presence. He felt that the space had been invaded. And for the first time, he felt real fear. Not the fear that makes you retreat. The fear that paralyzes. His muscles locked. The legs did not respond. The mouth dried up. He tried to release the woman, but his hands were too stiff. As if the body had forgotten how to obey, Mike reached out, slowly, not to hit, not yet, just to show that I could. His hand passed inches from the Reaper's face, and the man instinctively retreated his head, as a reflex, like defeat. The whole bar saw it. They saw the exact moment when the bully stopped being a bully. They saw the moment when his ego, it just fell apart. What about you? Have you ever seen someone realize that they lost before the fight even started? Mike didn't hesitate. His hand went straight to the brute's wrist, not with explosive violence, but with precision. Mike's fingers closed around his thick wrist like a walrus. Steadfast, controlled, absolute. The Reaper tried to pull the arm back. He couldn't. He tried to force it. Nothing. His muscle tensed. The shoulder trembled with the effort, but his wrist didn't move an inch. It was like trying to tear one's own hand off an iron vise. Mike held on. He just held on. And in that silence of restrained strength, the brute understood something he had never felt before. He was not strong. It never was. He only intimidated people who didn't fight back. The woman felt his hand loosen on her shoulder, not because he wanted to, but because his body was being forced to obey another authority. Mike pulled the Reaper's arm down. Slowly. No rush. Like someone bending a dry branch. The brute tried to resist. He locked his elbow. He arched his back. He pushed with his whole body. But the arm kept going down, and going down, until his hand let go of the woman's shoulder completely. She stumbled backwards, seeking balance. The wobbly legs, uncontrolled breathing, but free. Mike didn't take his eyes off the Reaper. Now, breathe. His voice came out low, calm, almost gentle, but loaded with something that made the man's stomach turn. The brute tried to react. He tried to raise his other hand. The free hand. He closed his fist. He started to bring his arm up, as if he was going to hit Mike in the face, but he was too slow, too predictable, too desperate. Mike saw the blow coming from afar, and simply waited. He waited until the last moment. And when the Reaper's fist was halfway there, Mike let go of his wrist, and it advanced. He did not back down. Advanced, into the coup, into the space of man. And with his right hand, firm, precise, Mike struck his solar plexus. A short punch, dry, efficient, no display, no excess, just what is necessary. The sound was muffled, deaf, like punching a wet sandbag. The brute froze. His eyes widened. The mouth opened, but no sound came out. The air was ripped out of his lungs at once. His legs weakened, the knees bent, and he fell. It didn't collapse all at once. It fell in stages. First his knees touched the ground, then the hands, then the whole body bent over, desperately trying to draw in air that didn't come. Mike took a step back. He took a deep breath, and he looked at the other Reapers. None of them moved. 2 of them, those who were closer, raised their hands slightly. Universal gesture. We don't want a problem. The older Reaper, the one who had locked the door, simply looked down. Mike turned to the woman. He held out his hand. She held on. And when her fingers touched his, she was finally able to breathe for real. The brute was still on his knees, his hands spread out on the wooden floor. The head down. The breath coming gradually. Short and painful. He tried to get up. He rested a hand on the ground. He tried to push his own weight up. It went up 1/2 meter, and it fell again. The shoulder hit the wood with a dull thud. No one went to help. None of the reapers moved. None of them reached out. None looked at him with solidarity. They just watched, like someone who watches the fall of something they already knew was going to fall. As someone who sees the inevitable happen. Mike was still standing, the woman next to him. He pulled her gently back, away from the fallen man, away from danger. She obeyed. His legs were still shaking, but now it was just adrenaline. It was no longer fear. Mike didn't take his eyes off the brute, not with hatred, not with contempt, with surveillance, because dangerous men are more dangerous when they are wounded. The reaper lifted its face off the ground, the red eyes, the mouth half open, saliva running down the corner of her lips. He looked at Mike, and for the first time, there was no arrogance in that look. There was shame, the kind of shame that comes when the ego crumbles in front of everyone, when the mask falls and what is left is just a weak man pretending to be strong. He tried to speak. Not me. The voice came out hoarse, broken. Mike didn't answer. He just noted. The brute rested both hands on the ground again, this time with more care. He pushed his body up slowly. He managed to get on his knees. Then, leaning on a nearby chair, he managed to get up. He stood up, reeling, holding the chest with one hand. He looked at his teammates, waiting for something. A gesture, one word, anything, but they looked away. Everyone. The older reaper folded his arms and looked down at the ground. The one in the cap turned his back and walked to his desk, pretending he was looking for something. The thinnest one, the one who had said, "Show who's boss," simply left through the back door, without looking back. And the brute noticed. She realized that it wasn't just his body that had fallen. That was all. Reputation, respect, the illusion of power. Everything had collapsed in a single stroke. He took a step toward the front door. The legs still did not obey properly. But he continued. It passed Mike. He kept his head down. He didn't dare to look. And when he passed the woman, she turned her face. Not afraid. Disgusted. The kind of disgust that doesn't need words. He walked out the door. The sound of his footsteps on the asphalt became more distant. And then, silence. The entire bar fell silent. It was not a silence of tension. It was a silence of conclusion. Like when something that needed to happen, it finally happens. Mike let out the air slowly. He adjusted the towel around his neck. He looked at the woman. "Okay?" She nodded, but his eyes filled with tears. Not pain, of relief. He pulled her close. He wrapped his arm around her shoulders. And for the first time since it all began, she felt safe. Share this video. Someone needs to remember that real strength. It doesn't scream. Mike still held her shoulders. Steadfast, protector, but no pressure. She leaned her head against his chest for a second. Only one. Enough to remind me that she was no longer alone. Then he walked away. He wiped his face with the back of his hand. He took a deep breath. And he stood up. "On your own." Mike looked at her. He checked his neck. The red marks were still there, but she was whole. He nodded, satisfied. Then he turned to the bar. The remaining reapers were still scattered around the tables. 5 men. None of them looked directly at Mike. Some fiddled with the empty glasses. Others looked at their own hands. One of them lit a cigarette just to have something to do. Mike took a step toward them. Not in a hurry. Not angry. Only towards. And everyone felt it. The oldest reaper, the one with the scars, looked up for a moment. Then he swerved again. Mike stopped in the center of the bar. He looked at each one of them, slowly, one by one. He said nothing. He didn't need to. His look said it all. "You saw what happens. You know what I can do. And you know I don't hesitate when someone I love is touched." The silence weighed like lead. Then Mike raised his arm. Not to threaten. To point out. He pointed to the door. Is that it? A simple gesture. Steadfast. Speechless. The older reaper understood first. He stood up slowly. He took the glass from the table. He left some crumpled notes next to him. And he walked to the exit. He passed Mike keeping his distance. Head down, shoulders hunched. The second followed. Then the third, one by one. None of them spoke. None of them protested. They just left, like dogs expelled from a territory that was never theirs. The last to leave was the one with the cap. He stopped at the door. He turned his face back, as if he were going to say something. Mike just stared, and the man gave up. He lowered his head, and he left. The door slammed behind him. The sound echoed in the empty bar. Mike stood in the center for a few more seconds, breathing, feeling the space. The bartender, who had been behind the counter the entire time, finally moved. He took a clean glass. He filled it with water, put it in front of Mike. "On the house?" His voice came out low, respectful. Mike nodded. He took the glass. He drank slowly. The woman approached. She stood by him. He said nothing. It just stayed. And in that silence, in that bar that minutes ago was full of aggressive laughter and fear, now there was peace. Not the peace of those who avoided the conflict, the peace of those who faced it. And he won, and he didn't have to prove anything else. Mike placed the empty glass on the counter. He adjusted the towel around his neck. He looked at the woman. "Let's go." She nodded. He picked up the bag that had fallen on the floor, and the two walked to the door. Together, Mike opened the door for her. Simple gesture, chivalrous. She passed, and before leaving, Mike looked back one last time, to the empty bar, for the chairs that once had dangerous men, to the wooden floor where a bully had fallen, and then he left. The door closed behind him with a soft click, and the bar fell silent. The kind of silence that remains after the storm passes. No one there would ever forget that night. Neither did the bartender. Neither did the reapers. Not even that brute who learned, the hard way, that respect is not required. It is conquered. The street was silent, just the distant sound of engines, the light wind between the buildings, the yellow light of the streetlights cutting through the darkness. Mike and his wife walked side by side. She held his arm, not afraid, but with connection, with silent gratitude. Their footsteps echoed on the asphalt, rhythmic, synchronized. After a few meters, she stopped. She turned to him. Her eyes were still moist, but firm. "Thank you." Her voice came out low, but loaded. Mike shook his head. "You don't have to." He looked at her. He checked his face. The neck. The hands. "Are you really okay?" She nodded. "Now I am." And for the first time since it all began, she smiled. Not a big smile, just a small one, but real. Mike smiled back. Discreet. Tired, but satisfied. They walked again. And there, on that empty street, under the dim light of the streetlights, something became clear. It wasn't about the punch. It never was. It was about being present, about not hesitating, about putting the body between danger and the one you love. It was about being the kind of man who doesn't need to shout to be heard, that you don't need to threaten to be respected, that you don't need to prove anything, because he has already tasted everything. Inside the bar, the bartender was still standing behind the counter, staring at the empty chairs, for the abandoned bottles, for the crumpled notes left in a hurry. He nodded slowly. He picked up a cloth. He began to clean the counter. And as he cleaned, he thought of how many times he had seen large men enter there thinking they were invincible. He thought about how many times he had seen them go out small. But that night was different, because it wasn't about ego. It was about justice. Outside, far away, the Iron Reaper's brute walked alone on the sidewalk, the hand still pressing against his chest. Her breathing was still sore, but the physical pain was not the worst. The worst thing was the memory of the moment he realized he was nothing, that the strength he thought he had was borrowed, phony, frail, and that in front of a real man, he was just a cowardly bully. He stopped under a pole. He leaned against the wall, and for the first time in years, he felt ashamed. The kind of shame that teaches. What a mark that changes. That night, inside that bar, in front of those witnesses, a lesson was given without words. A lesson that none of them would ever forget. It is not the size of the scream that defines a man. It's not the strength of the fist. It's not the leather vest or the tattoo. It's what he does when someone innocent is being hurt. It is the courage to enter, to face, to protect, even when you're alone, even when others are silent, even when it would be easier to turn your back. What about you? Would you be that man? Would you be that woman who, even though she was afraid, stood up? You'd have the guts of not being a coward. If this video moved you, if this story made you feel something, so leave your like now. Comment on the moment that impacted you the most. Share with someone who needs to remember that real strength comes from within. Subscribe to the channel, because every week there are real stories like this, which move the soul. And it activates the bell. Because there are people who need these lessons, and you can be the one who takes this message forward. The real strength rarely screams, it just acts, and when it acts, it changes everything. See you in the next video.